Austin's the recipient. Kolisi to the short side and marked!
Kia ora and welcome to the Aotearoa Rugby Pod. One of my favourite things about this job is you never really know what we're going to be talking about next week. And one thing I didn't think we'd be talking about was a 35-7 hammering of the All Blacks by the Boks. But we did kind of think that maybe Fiji was a chance against England. So it'd be great to talk about that during the show. Plenty to get through on a weekend where the Rugby World Cup and who could win and who couldn't win was all thrown out the window. And now we've got a tournament coming up in a couple of weeks where we just don't really know what's going to happen outside of the fact that France are going to be pretty bloody good. So let's bring the guys in. James Parsons, did you have a good weekend?
Yeah, I mean, it was good. There's a lot of footy. NPC went well. But I suppose my two teams, the All Blacks obviously struggled and Harbour lost last minute. So outside of that, there was some good rugby played. I think it's great for Fiji.
Yeah.
I thought that was a great result, and I thought Samoa fronted up as well, which was good to see.
Superb. And if that form continues, who knows what the quarterfinals might look like?
Just leaves everything in the air. I do agree with you. I think France are well placed. Like, they seem to be peaking at the right time.
Speaking of peaking, bringing in Bryn Hall all the way from Japan. He's had a couple of rests. And, you know, now he's going to be ready to bring his absolute A game into this World Cup preview show. We've got a couple of World Cup preview shows, but Bryn Hall, how's it over there, mate? You good?
Not too bad. Probably actually had a bit of a stop, actually. Got COVID on the Sunday test before the old yo-yo, so...
You got COVID just before fitness testing?
Yeah, got away with the yo-yo, so got a bit of stick from the lads, but no doubt I'll be picking it up pretty shortly.
He was walking down the aisles of the plane, breathing in everyone's air.
To be fair, this man does not struggle with any fitness tests. So I think if it was a lower number in the team, you'd say it's well timed. But for him, he probably would have beaten most crook.
Okay, well, what we'll do is we'll get into this big time today into what happened on the weekend. But we've also got to acknowledge we're going to have Rieko Ioane later on the show in a series of the interviews we did with the All Blacks leading into this particular program. So let's go. This is the Aotearoa Rugby Pod, so we'll start with the All Blacks. Jipper, I know you didn't see that coming. To what degree were you surprised by the result, and which parts of the game were you most surprised by?
Probably just the way the ref interpreted it, to be honest, first and foremost, and that's what sort of started the flow. You know, we said a few weeks ago that, you know, sort of set piece, maul D and discipline's probably going to decide this World Cup, and a big part of adjusting, I suppose, to a ref is about that. And you know, there's a certain way that he interpreted that you couldn't touch the jumper, but you know, from a defensive maul point of view, it's just used as a guide to get your timing right to hit in. But because he saw that as, you know, sort of interfering with the opposition before, those are where those advantage. And then because that's the system you trained, it's quite hard to sort of adjust that and get the timing right. And they didn't get the timing right, which led to the cards. And I think from there, you know, there's some pretty solid D in that first part, but I think that sucked a lot out of the tank as well, because they were covering cards, and then, you know, and if you look at it statistically, you know, the All Blacks, they were pretty even, if not better statistically, but because of the inability to have 15 on the field for long periods and to stop that maul, like that's where the problem. And I think if we can rectify that, you know, Jace Ryan's the best in the business, you know, in terms of that, then I don't think we'll see that. You know, if we use the Marks try as an example, because they're shorter man, you know, Artie has to have his head in that maul. Normally you want to be on the outside so that you can help Aaron out. But, you know, they had such dominance, it was a great decision to go to that front play. But do you just see how it affects the whole defensive system, and you can't sort of be half committed to a maul. So, you know, Artie had to go in, and then, you know, Aaron did well to try and get to Marks, but he was never going to stop him. So I don't think it's as drastic as that scoreline says.
Just before we go to Bryn, I just want to, because some people I think are going to raise their eyebrows going, the All Blacks dominated.
I don't think it's dominate, but if you look at the statistics, you know, in terms of gain line percentage, like I was surprised that they were at 49% gain line percentage, more clean breaks, I suppose less errors, similar amount of penalties, believe it or not. But the cards really, really drove it home.
Les errors is an interesting one, Bryn, because my memory of it is that they dropped the ball, struggled to hold it in the tackle. There were all those things going on constantly that the All Blacks, in some ways, while the Springboks were very dominant and very good, were their own worst nightmare with just basic stuff.
Yeah, and I guess that comes back to pressure. You know, you talk around the first half, look, the first 20 minutes, man, I think we had 8 or 9 penalties against us, and that came through, obviously, the ill discipline at the line-out time and not getting that right and not being able to interpret the refs' way of how they ref the game. I think first and foremost, that's probably a great learning that we're able to get it before going into the World Cup, that, you know, the Southern Hemisphere, Northern Hemisphere refs, they just ref it differently. And so it's a great learning for that group, I think, that to be able to adapt on the run with solutions. And look, they probably tried to on the field. No doubt they would have talked around, you know, what the solution is of how we can rectify the line out, which they actually did, you know, in that first half. I think within the first 10 minutes, they didn't actually score from it and they were able to find solutions. But, you know, then the back of that, you know, 2 different ways of scoring tries, one around the front with marks, and then obviously Kwaha Smith in the second half going through that transition area. So the variety that the South Africans used was great in terms of being able to get the All Blacks thinking in and around not just the maul, but in and around their attack structures. But yeah, just the discipline areas, it's a massive improvement that they're going to have. And then I think also the handling areas in the second half, I think was just built to scoreboard pressure. I think with the tries that were being scored, not being in that kind of mindset, I think, in that situation this year, especially not being put under pressure, it all kind of came in one big heap in that second half, and we were able to try and chase the game, which we haven't done this year. So if you do look at it is dominating in terms of the score. You do look at the scoreline, you think the All Blacks were dominated, but I agree with Jip. The interpretation of what we're going to have to look at with these Northern Hemisphere refs, trying to get their right solution focused, and then being able to not give away yellow cards and red cards, which in Tau really lost us the test match, I believe.
The worst thing to do against a Springbok side, or even when we played Super Rugby against South African sides, is to piggyback them into the 22. So out of the 12 times South Africa entered our 22, 9 of them were mauls. Yeah, obviously 2 trick plays, but you know that's a lot. There's a lot more than you desire when, you know, the biggest weapon to stop a maul is not give away a penalty.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, because that's the first step. If your discipline's really, you know, strong, you're not going to give them that access to the 22, which they did really well in Mount Smart. But 9 out of 12, they're going to the corner, and they've got variation now, interpretation of the ref. And another thing is, when you get offside with a ref, that naturally, I think they look at the team that's given all the penalties a little bit more, and you get away with a little bit more if you're the other opposition. And that's why I always say, you know, like teams that can adjust to refs relatively fast, like test the boundaries early, but then adjust, are normally the ones that will come out the better. And that's, you know, the Springboks just put the acid on.
There are over 1,000 test caps in that 23. You would think that the ability to compose yourself and have the experience to adapt to the ref on the go should have been something that All Blacks team had in spades. Yeah,
there was a sense of frustration. Like you could even see, I think it was, I don't know if you remember at Bryn when Aaron passed, Ethan de Groot was the pointy end of the triangle in the goal line, and it went past and Sam Cane had to force it, and then they got that scrum from there. You could see sense of frustration because there was mounting of pressure. I mean, no one's superhuman. It doesn't matter how many test caps you have. When you make that many mistakes, yes, they'll have systems to go to, but you know the reality is they just didn't get the ability to execute them.
For that group for the next 2 weeks, the amount of things that they'll be able to learn, and knowing that they're going to be playing the French in the first round, the very first game with all the crowd, they might not get things that go their way. You know, let's just say hypothetically, we play that test match, we beat South Africa, and we don't get that opportunity that we had in France for the very first game, which was all these kind of things happen with the reffing, not being able to stunt that kind of snowball effect, which in turn kind of happened for that first game. So I know it's not an excuse, but I know the learnings that have been made within that group of when they're getting themselves in that situation, they'll be a lot better for it. But they tried. Look, man, I can imagine, Egypt, when you're in those kind of situations, you'd be thinking solution focused, but sometimes you can always do solutions, but at the same time, it comes back to an execution and then being able to get the momentum and confidence from there, which they didn't get on the weekend.
And they're going to have to, depending on where Scott Barrett, situation goes. If Brodie's injured, I don't know what that bench makeup, if they're going to stick with a 33 and not replace someone. You've got Sam Whitelock, Tupou Vaa'i, which will go into the locking positions. Then you've probably got Luke Jacobson, Sam and Artie. And then you've got Dalton on the bench, but there's no locking cover or another loose forward because Frizzell obviously They may need to push for either a Brody or a Frizzell to come back earlier than the desire in the French game. So it's straight into the straight into it. It's not. They certainly haven't had it all their own way before they've even entered the World Cup in the situation they're in, and they don't have to confirm that 33 till they go in. So they may make an adjustment to cover this.
It was only a few weeks ago we were talking about the fact that this 18-15 split within the 33, 18 forwards, 15 backs, seemed a little risky. Here we are now, and it's born as fruit. It's bared fruit? How does that English go?
Fruit.
There's fruit. There's fruit, Bryn.
Well, there is. And I think, look, you go in with plans and thinking that, if you're looking around more so the loose forward and lock-in trio, you're hoping to think that we were a little bit thin when the 18-15 split was named, not thinking that this kind of thing would happen right now, but you have to think there are contingency plans around what that's going to look like. And they do have 2 weeks before they do go in. It seems like Brody's recovering faster, so he's on the golf course with a knee brace. So he can't be too far away. So, but yeah, you just like to think, man, if we do get a couple more little injuries here and there might have to be an adjustment come in 2 weeks' time and bring in a Sepeni Finau or, someone else in that loose forward 6 cover, which we might have lost in that first game.
And then do you lose a winger?
Yeah, I suppose you have to.
Yeah.
And that would be pretty harsh, but they'll know the outcome of Scott's situation prior to entering the World Cup. So you'd have to think everything's on the table because the other option would be you hope maybe a back can cover loose forward. I'm not too sure. I know we don't even like fullbacks playing centre, so maybe we don't like backs going. So there might need to be a change. I don't know. Like I'm just saying, there's a lot. If Frizzell or Brody are not tracking ahead of schedule, they were both not supposed to play that first round. So yeah, there's plenty of food for thought.
Less defying Nuku, I presume, is your loose forward cover if you are going to
I reckon Geordie Barrett, man. He's a big body. You could line-out option, mate. You get in the air. He just replaced his brother.
Well, he can play everywhere, can't he? And he's got the height for it. So, yeah, your Geordie Barrett he was there on the weekend. And so you have to ask the props and seeing if he was pushing or not. But I can imagine being a Barrett, he would have done pretty well on that space, I think. But even Leicester can cover at a pinch. Geez, if you got in there, what if. But you'd have to think they'd have to get rid of a winger if they're going to bring in another loose forward because, you can't be going the whole World Cup with a back being able to cover the loose forward like that.
Yeah. Now, we're having this conversation, obviously, before Barrett's judiciary hearing. So, we have to talk around that. But I do want to talk about Scott Barrett a little bit because there's history here. There was the 2019 red card. I think last year for the Crusaders, he copped 4 weeks with a red card. He is now a very senior member of this team. He's now a vital member of this team with the form he's been showing over the last year. He did go and see the appropriate mental skills coaches after the last one to try to make sure it was out of his game. What does he have to do now?
Well, the hard thing is if he hadn't gone near the head, and it was hard to see on the footage if there was direct contact, did it hit the shoulder to shoulder and then that, it obviously did strike the head at some point because Marks was blowing up.
Yeah.
But if he managed to sort of, there is the ability when bodies align like that, you can clean maybe more towards the rib area.
Yeah.
And as long as you keep your feet going and you remain on your feet, but I suppose because it was a straight dive down, that's when he, sort of put himself just in penalty range, let alone yellow card range. It's a fine balance. I don't think it's anything drastic. He's played a lot of rugby since, I suppose, that incident or those incidents at Super Rugby. It doesn't concern me. It's an enforcer position. It had to set the tone. Maybe the situation, but I think we've said it. A lot of them were out of kilter, a little bit flustered. So, when you do get in that redhead, as they call it, it is. And speaking from experience, it is hard to adjust when you're that frustrated with probably yourself and the way the game's going.
It's also a good reminder, I think, for not only the All Blacks, but I think for the teams going into the Rugby World Cup. If you get it wrong and the ref misses it, that bunker system has been massive in the last week. You look at the ability of you can hear it on the refs' mics of I've seen this, I've seen that, and so there's nowhere to hide in that sense. So we've talked about it a lot around adapting to the ref and being really squeaky clean. The team that's got the best discipline and been able to adapt to the refs first and foremost, and then also the ability of doing your role, not illegally, it's going to be massive because, man, with this red card system and not being 20 minutes. Yeah, well, yeah, and we talked about it a lot the last couple of years, and the fact that 20-minute spell isn't going to be enforced at the World Cup, 40, 50 minutes, you're going to lose a test match. And so you got to be squeaky clean. And there'll be a lot of mental skills and a lot of, I guess, messages from the coaches to be able to get that right, because you could lose a World Cup on it.
Also, it was our doing, as in All Blacks ill discipline. Like, they're in control of changing it. Whereas if you're just blowing off the park and you'd given your best shot and lost 35-7, I think, it would be a lot more drastic. But it is a record, and that'll certainly hurt that side, But it is showing the importance, and, what does the 7-1 bench and it actually working, and we went with a 6-2.
Yeah.
They're obviously labouring my point that it's one up front. But, the hard thing is, and hate to bring it back to league, but the New South Wales Blues did something like this. I think they went heavy on their forwards on the bench, and then they lost 2 backs.
Yeah.
And that's the only time it's like, would it be Quagga Smith that would have played, because he's played sevens?
Yeah.
And obviously Reinach apparently can cover pretty much everywhere. But that's the only thing, is if you lost a few people, it would put you under a bit of pressure.
Yeah, I suppose you play with Quagga during the season, don't you? He's an athlete. Would you back him to come in on the wing or at fullback?
Mate, you could put him anywhere. Put him at halfback. He's a great guy bringing off the bench. And if you're talking around that 6-2, I don't think they'll do a 7-1, but I'll be very surprised if they did that. But that 6-2 bench, and you can have a guy that can cover that. Look, Quagga can play. He can play on the wing. He's even done it for us when we've been in what-if kind of scenarios. He's fast. And look, on the weekend as well, that ability that he has, he's the best snatcher, I think, Jackler, in that team. And, it was evident on the weekend, being able to get a couple of steals, and then also his direct running to be able to score his try. He does that for his bread and butter. So, they've got that great ability, I think, with those forwards and that 6-2 split. They do it very, very well. I think 7-1 will be at a pinch because, look, if there are injuries in that back line, a centre, you can't have Reinach or Quagga play centre. But look, it's probably introduced for us to have that kind of 6-2 split, you know what I mean? I think in terms of where the game's at in that breakdown area, and you've got to have big forwards and especially forwards coming on and having an impact, we might see a 6-2 split with us happening, and a lot of teams in this Rugby World Cup doing that.
I literally got out of my seat when I saw they were bringing on almost an entire forward pack at once, because it was super exciting. I was like, what we love about the Springboks is innovation, whether it's having the coach on the sideline as water boy or whatever it might be. They push the boundaries, don't they? And I found that really exciting. But I also found quite disappointing was the All Blacks were obviously suffering at that point. And you kind of felt when they saw that happen, maybe they should have been replying in kind, instead of bringing on the replacements and drips and drabs, because it just felt like this force came through and there wasn't an answer to the question, I
think they were forced into it. They have to manage the bench in the sense that obviously Newell had to come on really early. Jacobson had to be removed so Tupou Vaa'i could go to lock. So that it wasn't really in their control in terms of how they rolled their subs. So I don't think that was the making or breaking of the test match. I think even when that bench came on, we all know we were struggling. And I didn't really. I reckon if that Will Jordan try had been let go, maybe we had a bit of belief and a bit of energy going into the break and able to come back out. But just felt like it was one of those days. Like it just wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
It just was not going to happen. And I suppose the one bright spot, I thought Cam Roygaard was exceptional, president of the fan club, so just needed to get that in there. And Mark Talea, I think he played really well. I know his knock-on was the one that took Jordan's try off, but two guys that performed really well under pressure.
I think also just with the South Africans as well, and you talk around Ross having that 7-1 split and then bringing it on, I thought the way that they were able to do, this is why I think they're so dangerous in that first half, and even in the second half, when they do score that point and they're leading by that much, I thought their kicking game from Faf de Klerk and being able to have the contestables really squeezed us, and we weren't able to attack off that. And we had a lot of mistakes, obviously, not just due to the kicking, but the fact of just, I think, being the scoreboard pressure. But that's what I think South Africa do really well. They have that ability to be able to attack, which we've seen through the Rugby Championship. But if they're going to get into a lead like that, there's a bit of drizzle or something like that, they can really squeeze you and go back to that kicking game with Fluffy what they did on the weekend. So I think we've talked around, it was our own doing in terms of our discipline and that, but at the same time, we've got to credit South Africa, especially around their maul at scrum time as well. They had some good penalties in the dominance and the parity in their set piece, and so I think it's pretty well polished performance, I think, from the South Africans. But Cam Roygaard, man, I'll tell you what, that was a hell of a try, and his ways of him being able to influence games, I think, will be massive, I think, and probably cemented him at number 2 at this stage going into the Rugby World Cup now.
This pre-World Cup series has been amazing, like the precursor to the Cup itself.
Full of drama.
It has been a wonderful setup to get a tournament going, Bryn. It hasn't happened like this before, and it should always happen like this, in my opinion, from here on in. What do you think?
Oh, I think so. I think first and foremost, the squads and the teams that can be able to win this World Cup, it's never been so open. So there's that obviously excitement that anybody could win the competition. It's not a foregone conclusion that it's two or three teams.
Or even Fiji, Bryn, Jipper, after that performance on the weekend. I mean, we've been talking, he's excited. We've been talking about the draw. You said a couple of weeks ago after the Japan game that this is a team to watch.
Yep.
And here they are doing what they did on the weekend against a very poor England team, and they really showed them what's up.
So I know I harped on about this with the Drua, but I was interested to see, and I said this after the Japanese game, their game management is their biggest improvement. So we've got 2 rucks in their own 22, we've got 15 in their own half, 15 rucks total in their own half, and then 63 obviously in the opposition half. So just to give you a sense, they're just not playing rugby out of their half. They have got a good kick strategy, and Glenn Jackson seems to be taking on the same sort of methods he had with the Drua. And then when it's almost like when they get permission is light it up. Once you're in their half, you light it up, go for it. But outside of that, we're either going to go to contestables or we'll find a way to sort of get to an edge and then kick. And their discipline around that is outstanding. They probably didn't quite have that right against France, and that costs you. But when they get it right, and similar to the Drua, they win test matches. And not only that is their option taking. So at the end, it was 3 tries apiece, but Muntz was pinpoint with his kicking, and I don't want to say it was choose him or Benny Volleyball. I don't know. I still think you could fit them both in the squad, but he made a big statement on the weekend. They're a genuine force with him at 10, and I don't know, just that forward pack's humming. Their set piece is strong. Their ability to keep the ball alive when they win collision. It's not reckless offloading. And on the flip side, England are just probably over trying. If I use the Kura volley try, there's 3 guys rushing to the player with the ball, and he just goes like that and he runs through. It's like they were so desperate to solve this situation on their own, rather than sort of staying connected and staying in that defensive system. Those opportunities don't present itself. But look, I've said it last week. When you're in these teams that are struggling, you do sometimes try too hard as individuals, and it breaks the system, and in the end that's what breaks them down.
I think a real important guy that I think is going to be massive for them is Frank Lamani. I've been so impressed with his game management and his execution of his kicking and understanding of when to kick when they don't have momentum, and along with Caleb Muntz. I think with Muntz as well, we talked about Ben Volleyball and the experience of having him there, but obviously I think with the way he played on the weekend, especially his goal kicking, which I think is massive in World Cups, to be able to, I think it's pretty perfect from the tee and being able to accumulate those scoreboard points. And I think all the Fijian boys need, especially their outside backs, they don't even need an overlap. They just need a one-on-one opportunity to be able to get past people. You talk around test matches and, the ability to be able to, there aren't going to be massive gaps. You're not going to have those overlaps, or you're going to have a lot of space. And all they need, their outside backs, and Naitha Levu and, their outside backs, just on the outside, back and the inside to Naitha Levu, and they score a try. And sometimes in test matches, that's all you're going to have. And they have the ability to be able to do that. And I think, their discipline as well was a lot better on the weekend, and their set piece, like Jip said, has been a lot better. So, I think playing the French, they got a really good acid test in the sense of what it's going to look like with a really top tier team. And then I think it was great for them to be able to take the learnings and then being able to implement that against, an English team that's really struggling for confidence. So now really good. And that draw, I think they've got a really good opportunity to get into that quarterfinal stage and even, more than that moving forward on that side of the draw.
Topping the pool even, Bryn.
100%. With the way that they're playing and the things that we've talked about, absolutely, that should be their goal. I know the quarterfinal is, but man, that draw, yeah, definitely, they're definitely in a chance of going top of that pool.
If they can give away 7 penalties every game, they probably will top that pool. Like 7 penalties, great game management, putting themselves in the right part of the field. Those 7 penalties, where were they given away? They definitely have positions where they'll chance their arm, and then they're really strict within their D structure and systems when it gets closer to the post and obviously to the in goal. And probably they haven't been too tested at maul time, so that maul D will be interesting against like a South Africa or potentially the French. But it's definitely looking up.
One thing that was very obvious was when Marcus Smith came on, there was a little bit of something about them. There was an intensity, there was a vibrancy in their attack, there was an intensity about a desire to make breaks and make things happen. And I just wonder whether they've got it wrong and whether he needs to be either starting at 10 or slotting in at 15, one of the two.
I think he has to be on there because he's the one player that reads the defensive body cues really well, and also has the ability to have vision, like the little chip over, and he's passionate. Like you see when he scores that try, like he's into it. So, he will make some mistakes. Like players like that, you just got to live with that. But they also can be match winners for you as well. So it's about him tempering that and understanding, I hate to use Fiji as an example to them, but not doing too much of that in your own half. But once you get into your half, if you see something, you've got to pull trigger.
Yeah, but it's hard. Like where do you put him? Because Owen Farrell is going to be at 10. You'd have to think whether you shift him off to 12. And he does play 10, but I think if he comes off the bench, it's been able to bring him on early like they did. That 30 minutes. 35 minutes, possibly even if the game isn't going where you want it. Because I think you are right. He's probably the only really attacking player that I see that things can happen in and around him. And they don't have a lot of that, I believe, at the moment, especially in the playmaking position. Look, and that's no disrespect to George Ford. He's more of a good game manager and, obviously has some good attacking kicks and his general play kicking is pretty good. But Marcus Smith does bring that attacking mindset. And look, I think that's what England do need. Geez, it can't get any worse. At the same time, Owen Farrell's going to be there, but whether you put him at fullback and you have that two playmaker like we do with the All Blacks with Richie and Bodie, you got nothing to lose. So I think having Marcus Smith on the field, I'd have him on the field personally, whether it's 10 or at 15.
I like him. I like the idea of 15. Like I sort of compare him to like a Stephen Perifeta, really quality first 5, but man, they're even more dangerous when they've got that time on the ball and they can assess and inject themselves from the back. That's not a bad shout. 10s have to drop back and play that backfield and deal with contestable kicks and stuff, so I'm sure he'd be fine with that, but it might just be what they need, something just to change it up. Well, they can't keep going on, can't keep doing what they've been doing because the body language of Courtney Laws probably says it all. Like they, almost looks like they're lost for answers as to where to go.
The commentators were lost for words. They were pleading the team on.
I think the last 10 minutes, I think they were just like, you could probably have the exact same expression as Courtney Laws. They just were defeated. Yeah. They were just like, I can't watch this anymore. And I'm just like, oh, geez. Commentators are usually quite... on the fence, but geez, they let know their frustration. That's for sure. They were bitterly disappointed and frustrated with that England game.
I think that'd be probably relatively indicative of what people around the world are going to be learning about teams like Fiji now. The first half they were basically talking about, Fiji are sevens players and they haven't been able to get it all together, blah, blah, blah. By the end, they knew the truth.
Yeah.
And it was an 80-minute education for them.
They clearly hadn't watched many of their warm-up games.
Yeah. There was an education. I think the world's going to see an education on a couple of teams this Rugby World Cup, which takes us to Samoa v Ireland, because they were this close, Jip. You know, they blew 2 opportunities. They should have won that game.
If we're honest, like, it wasn't Ireland's first string side, but I suppose the most impressive thing for me was what they kept. You know, Irish are normally that sort of bodies in motion, dominant carries, getting across the gain line. They kept the Irish to 33% gain line, which isn't very high. They had 56% gain line themselves. They had almost double the metres with less carries. You know, they dominate. They had disciplined 5 penalties. Samoa. So, like, all the similar things we were saying about the teams that did well on the weekend is, you know, they really nailed. The 2 areas where, you know, they'll be looking at most, I would suggest, is probably their line-out accuracy. So scrum was fine, good dominance, so that they operate at 65%. Tough conditions, but that's going to be a big part. If you can't win that set piece, it just means teams can kick to the sideline and almost back they're going to get the ball back. And then the maul D. Outside of that, you know, their accuracy defensively, their ability to manipulate the defence to create opportunity. Yes, didn't finish all of the opportunities, but it was tough conditions. Ireland had some opportunities as well that they didn't finish. But it bodes extremely well. And the one thing I like about it, there's a lot of players in that side that are based in the Northern Hemisphere, so they know how they play. You know, it's quite a big advantage, having that understanding of how they play and where to put pressure on. And, you know, I just think they got the balance right in terms of when to kick. They kicked quite a few times, 32 times they kicked, so they didn't want to play too much in the wet, and, you know, when to sort of pull trigger, which, you know, I just think this balance of attack, like this game management is really crucial to get right, because, and that discipline which they nailed on the weekend. On the face of it, there was a kick in behind, which got a good bounce for 1 try, and then the maul D, where they just steamrolled over. Outside of that, their phase D, they were hard to break down. And sometimes, like, I can't remember what part of the game was, but they read Ireland's kicking cues really well. Like, the midfield would come up, and then as they shaped kick, all you know, 3 of them would drop back and they'd have that kick coverage sorted. Like, they're very aware of what their systems and their D allowed them to do. And, you know, I know in Tana, like, he's very you know, efficient in the defensive systems he runs, and I suppose the simplicity of it. But yeah, I think they're in a good pool. They're a genuine opportunity. I mean, it could be a Fiji Samoa quarterfinal.
Yeah,
you know, it's I think it's exciting though. There's so many different teams coming to life. Like, it's probably the first World Cup really we've gone into going, man, I don't really know where this is going to land.
Yeah, outside of the French looking like they're on it, like, yeah, anything could happen. And in that pool, in Pool D, England, Japan, Argentina, Samoa, Chile, you know, counting out Chile, like, the other 4 teams, goodness me, like, other 4 teams, anything could happen. England could miss out, and it could be Argentina, Samoa. That'd probably be the initial pick. Yeah,
well, the way Japan's going, like, they had another tough weekend. Like, I don't know, they just, if they're going to be the storyline again, there's going to be some drastics. Like, I think the storyline of maybe knocking over some big teams is probably going to come from a Samoa or a Fiji.
It does make it interesting when it comes to squad management. You know, it had been that you could play a good team against this team, rest a bunch of people, and when you're looking at that draw in Pool D, I mean, outside of Chile, your squad management becomes integral, because you could get to the quarterfinals having needed to play all of your top players every game in order to get through.
Yeah, and I mean, we've already talked about, like, the dilemma of 33. Like, teams are so used to having 36, and I know it seems like 3 players, but it is, you know, look at the All Blacks situation. If there's a couple of injuries, that can change everything. Like, these sides are humming, but a couple of injuries to key players, and, you know, if they're out for the tournament, or you want to, you know, chance their arm that they're available for quarterfinals and you don't replace them, like, that man management is a big part of winning World Cups as well. I mean, we've seen it. 2011, how many first 5s did we go through? And you know that's going to happen.
Yeah,
that's a war of attrition, and the team that is best prepared will flourish. And I think, you know, if you look at it, Ireland and France have probably played the most players leading in and given the most opportunities. So, that will be interesting to see how that plays off.
Bruno, it did make you worry as a New Zealander looking at the way the All Blacks have prepped. Having one game essentially in a month leading into that first game, it does feel like they're going to be underdone. And from the weekend, it looks like it.
Jip, you know how hard it is when you have even a 5-week break, sometimes even a 2-week break. It's tough to be able to find that mojo, the little things. And I think on the weekend, there were just little things that the All Blacks were off with, whether it be a carry, a tip ball, or just, an offload a couple of times we weren't finding the right person. So it does come back sometimes. It takes a bit of time to be able to get the feelings going again. And so, it's only 2 weeks and they will be collectively another 2 weeks, and they'll, if anything, they'll be boiling a little bit of water with how that performance went. So not ideal, but at the same time, it does take a little bit, as you know, Jip, to get that mojo back, which I probably thought were a little bit underdone on the weekend as well.
Oh, I agree, but I also want to acknowledge that's the best I've seen the Springboks. I thought the Springboks were pretty good the week before, and I don't know if it's just by chance, but the 2 games Sia Khaleesi's been involved in, they've monstered teams. He's clearly an integral part to that team in getting their mojo going. So they just didn't allow us to get our game going. We just couldn't play our style just because of their defensive pressure and I suppose our inaccuracies on our own defence. So I think they've, they're probably after the Rugby Championship, people were like, oh, not sure, and then the way they've named their team. But man, Sia Khaleesi, he is clearly. He gets the lads up because they've been clinical the last 2 weeks.
Man, his collision area, his ability to be able to run the ball, hit rucks, it just adds another dimension to that group, which is already strong. Their loose forward trio in general and their full pack is strong, but I think it was a good reminder, going into that World Cup, how world class he is and what he brings to that South African team, not only on the field, but a lot of it coming off the field as well.
Let's go to the Rieko Ioane interview. Now, we did mention last week that this interview was coming up and we had a few questions come in for Rieko. Sorry, we couldn't ask them because the interview was recorded a few weeks back when we did all of these All Blacks interviews in one day. But we started off by asking a little bit about the gameplay, about his change from the midfield or to the midfield, and also what it looked like as far as who was the fastest player within this All Blacks squad. Rieko, thanks very much for coming on, mate.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Apologies for not having Jipper here, your number one fan.
Yeah. My guy.
He would have exploded on set if he had actually been here, but,
Nah, all good. Definitely looking forward to it. I'm glad Jip's not here. Sabbatical, is he?
Yeah, mate, you could arguably, if you had your career, one of the best wingers in the world. But obviously you played centre at Auckland Grammar, you came through the age grade playing that position. How have you found the last 24 months? Because you've obviously played there a lot now. That's kind of you're seen as a centre. What's been happening around the last 24 months? We're getting the best version of Rieko now?
Yeah, I think probably sort of when I first started playing centre, I guess, there was still a bit of chop and change around that wing role and even, having to cover it late in games. And now, obviously still having the ability to do that, but I've been able to focus, and coaches now, aren't sort of seeing me as that wing centre. It's centre first, and so I think that's probably helped. I've got time in the saddle in the teams that I've played for, and more so just the belief and sort of trust in them, and sort of because I've always believed in myself and my game at 13, and it's just a matter of sort of other people, the coaches seeing that. So that's probably the big part. And then I've had the sort of the goats of the midfield to work with throughout my time. I've had Tana, Sonny, Scucks for a bit at the Blues. So those three in particular for a 13 and a sort of 13 that's trying to establish himself. Those three, you can't look past them. They've helped me each in their own special way.
You've got your speed. I think your distribution has come a long way. You're right now, I think you're one of the best distributors in the world. Is there anything in particular that you're trying to hone your craft in to be the best in the world at?
I need to get you on the coaching. Stuff.
That's what I mean. That's what we talk about, mate. That's what we talk about.
Yeah, look, obviously there's always areas that you can get better at, and you sort of defensive tendencies are a big one, and they're sort of when you get into big moments or fatigue moments, that's where sort of your habits need to come into. So it's more that stuff. It's not too many big things, although there is big parts of my game that I probably could work on. For me, it's about fine tuning those, instinctive moments. So it's not to tuck and carry. It's now to draw and pass, or it is to, it's to slide and push in defense rather than just, rush up and jam. And it's getting more of those moments correct than not. So that's the way I see it. It's those little moments now becoming free flowing, because the centres that have gone before me, they've helped the game flow, and their impacts, although it might not be runaway tries or whatever, they've helped linking. They've made all their tackles. They've done their core roles really well, and I want to be able to do sort of that with what the flavour I bring to.
I look at the try against Argentina, the line that you ran for Damien McKenna, not Damien's try. Who ended up scoring that?
Bowden.
Bowden scored that again. I mean, those are your lines with obviously Geordie and doing the selfless act that you're talking about. Do you find that, working with Geordie now and getting that combination, you've gone through with David Havili a little bit, but you feel like you're getting the momentum and the mojo with working with Geordie? Yeah,
I think it is. And it's, I felt that similar. Davey and I were gelling quite well before he got injured, and it's a matter of I've had a couple games now on the trot with Geordie, and seeing what he brings, and sort of him bringing his best game to our back line, and me also bringing mine is what we've probably struggled with. We both want the ball, and but now it's about how we can control, both of our, like I talked about, our natural instincts are to carry, and now it's how we complement the back line, which is, I think, in a really nice spot. And like you said, those selfless acts pay huge.
So there's just a lot of conversations between you and him, just figuring it out.
Yeah, it is definitely. I mean, he's a big body. He's him and I similar weight, around that 104, 102 mark. So, he's always going to attract defenders, and he's like a bull at the gate, even off the training pitch. He's bloody intense. But his ability to offload and attract defenders, as a 12, that's that becomes your main role, and that's sort of becoming his role in our backline. He is that crash bash with the ability to kick and offload. So he's doing it all for us at the moment, and it's cool to see.
It's a crazy triple threat game he brings.
Yeah, 100%.
And just on that, because I think where you guys have got to at the moment, and you're forecasting obviously with the World Cup coming up shortly. You see the French and the Irish. The Irish came here last year and did a job when you was in the series. But where do you think where they're at is really important for you guys to be able to get it right? I'm thinking breakdown and your attacking kicks, which you guys have done really well in the past 2 test matches. Are those the areas that you guys are concentrating on, knowing what's ahead?
When they did come last year, their breakdown was huge, and they were getting 2-second ball every ruck, if not quicker. The ability for their bigger boys, their tight forwards to ball play, flat at the line with the backs they have. They came really well prepared, and I think they sort of modelled how the game was evolving. And now you see, the likes of our big boys being able to do the same. We're fitter, faster, and as you said, I feel we're in a place where we're more physical, especially around that breakdown. You look at our forwards and the work they're doing. It's as a back, it's easy to play off, and as a nine, I'm sure
100%.
You get to unleash the backs that you have with the forwards doing that.
Fitter and faster, Nick Gill in World Cup year, do you have to temper him?
Yeah, look, if I'm having as little interaction with Billy as possible, the year must be going pretty good. So, I think Gilly's been around a while, and he's a very knowledgeable man, and only recently he's found social media because he posts every week. But he's got a plan, and the boys every week we turn up, we're ready to play and the body's hissing, ready to go.
You're one of the fastest guys out there. What do you do to maintain your speed, and how do you go about training to keep yourself at that level that you need to be, whether it's a standing 10 or a standing 40 or whatever it is?
I think it's definitely changed. When I was playing wing, I was sort of getting a lot of opportunity on field as well as at training. Like in actual games, I was getting chances to run. But at 13 now, like the opportunities are few and far between in a lot of games. But as you said, working on that stuff during the week, and Gilly in particular, he's huge on speed, and he's got all of our, if not all of our backs, even our nines going, 50 metres or trying to reach that top end, because the way the game's going, everyone sort of is expected to finish those 40-metre breaks, and not be like Bryn and I. And
mate. Oh no, this guy I won't even remember. He was so young. I remember when I was at the Blues, and sometimes when you run the positive line, you'll know what that's about. You're just running in that sideline, and every single time it's quite easy to keep up with some players. But I remember Rieko a couple of times would go on the outside, and he'd just break through the line, and I'm trying to keep up with. This is when I was actually fast as well, and there's no way I was able to catch up with him. So when it comes to speed, there's not many faster. Maybe Will Jordan might be thinking a bit different, but you're pretty electric.
Will Jordan, is it?
I don't know, is he?
Is that the word game now?
I don't know. He does back himself on Will, as you know.
Yeah, like Jill's rapid. There's a few boys in the team that are flyers. I mean, basically all of our backs, bar probably our 10s onwards, and probably Chuck, Cam and Finn and the...
Oh, no, Nug.
Oh, Nug is... I think Finn's got him for speed, but so I chuck our 10s onwards. Everyone can move. So.
Yeah. You're backing yourself. Maybe Jordan second.
Oh look, I don't know if and I'm happy there's no Olympics, so this is all just talks. Yeah.
Now, mate, just wanted to, we've had a lot of code. This is obviously a code show. I'm going to take it a little bit lighter. You still into your shoes? Because if I remember correctly, when I was younger, you used to wait in line for the shoe label. Obviously, you're now a little bit more world known. You getting this for free now, are you? Those shoes are not lining up at 12 o'clock at night?
Mate, nah, honestly, I still enjoy the thrill of it, but definitely not lining up. But look, I was a big sneaky head, and obviously now everything I wear is Adidas. So,
it comes to free now.
I'm just grateful, hand up, not out.
Yeah, that's it. All right, what else keeps you going? Like, we've talked a lot of golf today. You're not into golf?
Oh, nah, not as much as the other boys, and I'm sure you've had a few that love it, but. Yeah, look, honestly, days off for me are very cruisy, and even if we get a week off or two, it's just myself at home. I've got my partner there. I've got my dog and my 2 cats, and it's enough for me. And so. Yeah, I'm basically at home, out at the beach or whatnot.
He's 26 years old, and you've done so much, Centurion, 60 test matches. You're probably going to be going close to be a Centurion as an All Black, obviously, with how long you've signed. What are your goals? What do you obviously want to win a World Cup, but you've got 4 years you've committed to New Zealand.
Yeah.
What do you want to do before you end your career here in New Zealand? I
guess everyone's goal is to bring home that trophy, but outside of the All Blacks environment, look, I just want to be the best player I sort of can be, and obviously I want to get that super title, that especially back home. So those are probably the 2 immediate goals. But then outside of that, there's going to be other things that pop up, and I'm sure in a couple of years' time or a year's time, that would have changed by then. But.
So mature, man. Mature since when I was with him. Love it. Love it.
26, but he's been in the game for like 7 or 8 years.
It seems like he's 30, but he's 26 still in his prime.
Feels like I'm 30.
Awesome, mate. Well, thank you very much for joining us on the show.
Thank you.
Good luck for the upcoming games and the World Cup.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, brother.
Okay, who's your money on? If you were to put Will Jordan and Rieko Ioane in a race, let's say standing 40 metres.
All I can say is Rieko will not leave until he wins.
Is that right?
I remember in the gym we used to do 10 and 20 metres, and Caleb Clark got quite a quick time, and Rieko was just running up, multiple times until he did it.
Yeah.
He will refuse to lose. So for that, I'll probably back him.
Rightio. What about you? Your old flatmate, is he in the running, do you think? Will Jordan?
What is he like through the lights, Bryn, previously?
He's pretty quick. I think it was actually him and Braden Enel are pretty quick through the lights. Braden's pretty fast. So Rico's pretty fast.
Like, I reckon his stride length, he just is, it's so long. Like, I just remember looking at it, it'd be like, for 20 metres, she'd be all over in 4.5 strides, whereas there'd be about 26 for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, now, one of the things that we're doing at Sky is encouraging people to get up for it, because if you're a New Zealand viewer, these games are happening early in the morning, or not so early in the morning, 6:30ish as well. It's not a bad time, especially as a parent. You're quite happy that the call was coming out at that time anyway.
Yeah.
You don't even have to set an alarm, just set the sun to 6:30 and let it scream out. But yeah, so getting up for it is going to be a big thing in the Southern Hemisphere, to get up to watch these games. So one of the things that I really want to know about, Bryn, from you, is what is your best memory of getting up in the middle of the night to watch a game of rugby?
I'd have to go with two. The first one was when I was a young guy. It was the Bledisloe Cup match when Jonah Lomu scores it in the corner. I was with my mates when I was younger. We were like at a sleepover. That's how young I was. I was at a sleepover, and we ended up watching that. That was a pretty cool one. And then I think with the 2015 final, I don't think I slept. I tried to stay up, and we were out in Auckland town. So with all my best mates, there's about 10 of us, and we were at a Britomart Country Club at the time, which I don't think's there anymore. But we were up all early doors in the morning there. So yeah, she was a good one.
You made it to the game.
I stayed awake. For it. So there's a few people which kept me up. So that was a good memory. 2015 World Cup final.
How old were you in 2000 when Jonah scored in the corner?
I was born 92. I think I was like 8.
8.
I think. 8. Yeah. Got up early. It was nice. Oh, late, sorry.
I was studying high school. That hurts.
I was just of drinking age, so I had a good time there.
Mine, I reckon, like my first one would have been the semi-final against England in '95 World Cup. I remember that was pretty big because obviously the steamroll of Mike Catt happened, and I was probably similar age to Bryn. I was probably about 8 then. And it was always a big thing in our household to get up, especially World Cup. So there's that one. And then obviously in '96 as well, I just remember seeing Fitzy on his knees banging when they won the first sort of series in South Africa. So, and they were hard on their line. Like that was a big moment. So yeah, it was always interesting. Do the haka as a little kid. You just thought get a Milo. It was good times.
Now, of course, we're 2 weeks away from the World Cup, and you can catch all of that on Sky, whether it's on the Sky Box with a subscription or on free-to-air, on our free-to-air channel, Sky Open. Catch all of the All Blacks games and all of the playoff games there. So there is plenty to catch, and it's all right here on Sky Sport. Super stoked this is coming up. 2 weeks to go, Jipper.
That's awesome that it's all free to air. The country's going to enjoy that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely, because it is going to be a huge tournament.
Oh. So
we'll see what happens. First game against France, of course. We'll see what happens. Thank you again, Bryn, for tuning in. I presume you'll be watching it from Japan, right?
Well, I definitely will be, but it's we're 3-4 hours behind when it'll be on, so it's going to be like 3:30 in the morning. So it's like I would be back home if it was usually. So it's usually good timing over here, but it's all right. I'll be up early doors, Ross and Jip, to watch that game live. France, All Blacks, round 1, how good?
He won't be coming out of a bar in Roppongi at 4 o'clock.
He might be. You never know. You never know.
Fair enough. And Jip, thanks again.
Cheers.
Next week, we'll be on again. We'll have a special guest. His name is Ben Darwin, former Wallabies prop, and a guy who fronts up a company called Gainline Analytics. We've had him on the show before. Please go back and watch that show with Ben Darwin from a couple of years ago to get a feel for what we'll talk about. Ben is absolutely huge on things like cohesion, on statistics, and his company works in with lots of sporting franchises and all sorts of sports all around the world, and he can give a great insight into what we can see from the teams that have played, who they've played, and all those kind of things, put them together to have a look at who might just win this World Cup. So should be a great time next week on Aotearoa Rugby Pod. Thank you once again for tuning in, whether it's on an audio pod, whether it's on Sky, or whether you're tuning on a RugbyPass around the world. Thank you very much. Mā te rā.